welcome to Rulebreaker. Today we're going to take a look at one of the most fascinating new factions from the Prophecy of Kings expansion for Twilight Imperium 4th edition, the Empyrean. These guys are super enigmatic. They play a very dangerous game, and you'll see why very shortly. I love the theming of them. They're cool, winged, faceless, sort of specters of death style artwork. They are not a massively aggressive faction despite their look. As you can see here, their disposition is contemplative and their tendency is political, and that alludes to a lot of what these guys do. They're very, very sneaky, and you'll see why very shortly. So let's go into what you get at the start of the game. Starting technology is Dark Energy Tap. That is one of the new techs in Prophecy of Kings, a blue tech, and it is as follows. After you perform a tactical action in a system that contains a frontier token, if you have one or more ships in that system, explore that token. Your ships can retreat into adjacent systems that do not contain other players' units, even if you do not have units or control planets in that system. So, two-part technology. It allows you to search frontier space. I think these guys are the only ones who can do that from the very start of the game. And you'll see that it's these tokens here, and they're going to be dotted around the galaxy after you set up the game. They're on systems that have no planets on them, and that are non-home systems as well. So essentially the Empyrean have a little bit of an advantage in racing to frontier space to take these tokens away and explore the frontier exploration deck. That's awesome. They like exploring, and this is a speedy way in. Let's take a look at their starting units. Alright, so their starting units are 2 carriers, which is lovely to see, 1 destroyer, 2 fighters, 4 infantry, and a space dock. So it's probably one of the weakest lineups of ships to start a game power wise in the whole game. Their strongest ship is a destroyer, for example. You don't have any clout really going on here, but they do have a lot of utility. They do have 4 infantry and 2 carriers, so they do have the opportunity to go spreading out their wings, shall we say, very early in the game and making a move for early conquering of planets. If you are starting the game without planets around you, it's going to be a little tough. So try and grab a spot on the board where there are systems with planets in it near you if you absolutely can, because that's going to be really key to your early game, because you're going to need to beef up this fleet sooner rather than later. And you're also going to want to be moving out more, as you'll see shortly with some of the techs and stuff and abilities. Alright, here is the Dark, their Nebula system that they live in. So this is a Nebula. As you can see, it has the anomaly tag around the outside of it. The only Nebula home system in the game. And normally a Nebula is the effects are that when you move into a nebula you must stop, and when leaving a nebula your movement is 1 no matter what your ship movement is. So these guys, it is a planet. It does have resources. It has 3-4, which is pretty good, and as you'll see on their racial board in a moment, the exception to the nebula is these guys themselves, the Empyrean. The nebulae don't affect their movement, so they're not hindered by the fact that their home planet and home system is a nebula. Alright, so looking at their race sheet here, something to note, they have 4 commodities, and that's going to be important later on, just to keep that in mind in case I forget to mention it to you later. They've got 3 abilities. The first one is something we just mentioned, Voidborn, which is nebulae do not affect your ship's movement, so they're not affected by anything with nebulae, whether that's their home system or a standard nebula out in the rest of the galaxy. And then their next ability is Ether Passage. After a player activates a system, you may allow that player to move their ships through systems that contain your ships. So normally If someone is trying to fly through a system with your ships in it, that's not possible. The Empyrean offer the ability to negotiate that with other players. Now, the key word here in this ability is after. So you could, if you were that kind of guy or gal, you could bait somebody into activating a system that they would require your allowance to passage through, and then you could say no. So that's really mean, and I highly recommend it if you're if you really want to do it, but you'll make an enemy at the table super fast doing that. What this really is, though, is you're going to be making pacts with other players quite a lot, and this ether passage ability allows you to spread your wings, get out there, make friends, get close to people, without appearing to be like this iron wall between maybe things like Mechatol Rex or another player's weak systems or whatever it is. The Empyrean are like a veil, they're not a wall. They can let you through if they want, and that is super different to the rest of the factions in the game, and it's a really key part of how they work. Their third ability is really interesting as well. It's Dark Whispers. During setup, take the additional Empyrean faction promissory note. You have 2 faction promissory notes, so I'll go through those in a moment, and we'll talk about why they're very, very interesting. Alright, but before we do that, let's talk about their racial technologies. So they've got 2 technologies. None of them are unit upgrades. They're both actual techs. The first one is called Void Watch. It's a green tech with 1 prerequisite on it, and it reads: after a player moves ships into a system that contains 1 or more of your units, they must give you 1 promissory note from their hand if able. Alright, so you could have a deck of promissory notes in your hand as a result of this. This is naturally a very strong deterrent for other people who are considering attacking you. As you may know, the promissory notes that everybody has, there's 5 or 6 of them. They range across different abilities in the game, including victory points. So if you're being a problem and you're stacking up a lot of these promissory notes, you're using them against the people who are trying to slow you down, or you're hoarding them so that people have to give you the ones they really don't want. So this is an amazing technology, an absolute game changer of a tech. You should get this as soon as possible, and be as annoying as you possibly can to the rest of the board, to make for an interesting game. So huge fan of Void Watch. Their second technology here, Ether Stream, is a blue tech with 2 blue prerequisites on it, and it reads: after you or one of your neighbors activates a system that is adjacent to an anomaly, you may apply +1 to the move value of all of that player's ships during this tactical action. Wow, so again, access, okay, like you or one of your neighbors activates a system, so it's you can choose to add +1 move. It doesn't even have to be you. It can be someone you are friends with, someone you're pretending to be friends with, or someone who you just want to help short term, to get into a fight with somebody else, to weaken both of them, whatever you think it is. Of course, it can apply to yourself. You can give yourself +1 if you're near anomalies, and your home system is an anomaly, don't forget, it has the red border on it. Okay, coming back here to take a look at their race board. They have standard units all the way across the board, nothing unusual there. So a quick look at their flagship. Alright, the Empyrean flagship Dynamo, and it has the ability: after any player's unit in this system or an adjacent system uses sustained damage, you may spend 2 influence to repair that unit. So kind of like a rolling sustained damage. So that's again after it has used sustained damage, so there's a timing window thing there, but spending 2 influence to repair a ship on the spot means you can stack up a load of influence with trade goods and cards, and essentially take sustained damage even on this one, and then heal it again straight away for 2 influence each time. Yeah, that's crazy. They have a standard enough 8 cost, 1 move and 3 capacity, and they hit on 5s, which is pretty good for a flagship. And as usual, rolling 2 dice. So Dynamo, pretty potent, almost like an immortal flagship. Really, really cool. Alright, now it's time to take a look at those 2 promissory notes that we saw earlier on. So the Empyrean, the only faction in the game that have 2 race-specific faction promissory notes, and they're Blood Pact and Dark Pact, and they're both cooperative based promissory notes. The first one, Blood Pact, has the action: place this card face up in your play area. When you and the Empyrean player cast votes for the same outcome, cast 4 additional votes for that outcome. If you activate a system that contains 1 or more of the Empyrean player's units, return this card to the Empyrean player. So you're handing this to a different player, and they can choose as an action to put a face up into the play area. So yeah, like basically you're doing this with somebody for mutual gain in the agenda phase. An additional 4 votes could sway the difference in a big law or directive. Interesting. And you know, it has that small thing of if they attack you, then you get a promissory note back, just like every other one. The Dark Pact, similar, but probably a little bit more powerful for the overall gameplay. This one reads: action, place this card face up in your play area. So again, the player chooses to put it in or not. And it reads: when you give a number of commodities to the Empyrean player equal to your maximum commodity value, you each gain 1 trade good. And then, like the other one, if you activate a system that contains 1 or more of the Empyrean player's units, return this card to the Empyrean player. Yeah, so the key thing about this Dark Pact one is the commodity value. Now I'll just flip this board over and you can see that the Empyrean has 4 commodities. I mentioned that earlier for this reason. Finding a trade partner with 4 commodities is not going to be hard. People are going to want to trade with you, especially if you've got Dark Pact on with them, because they're going to get 5 off of you, which is among the best in the game. So I don't think you're going to have a lot of difficulty trading Dark Pact with other players if you want to get that thing going, getting more trade goods going for your better bang for your buck. So 2 very interesting and useful even for you. You get a benefit. You think you're the only faction who really gets a benefit from their own promissory notes, even when they're in the hand of another player. So get them out there, use them as much as you can. So that's Blood Pact and Dark Pact. Alright, and onto the additional units board here for leaders and mechs. They have an agent called Akamar. They have a commander called Zwange. They have a hero called the Conservator Procyon, and a mech called Watcher. Must be Giles or Wesley driving that mech. Okay, so the agent, which you have at the start of the game, reads: after a player moves ships into a system that does not contain any planets, you may exhaust this card. That player gains 1 command token. So you're going to do this yourself, for you, a lot, I would say. And this is again tying in with the frontier token searching thing. You're going to want to move into systems with these tokens because you have access right away at the start of the game to the dark energy tap, and if you exhaust this, you're going to get your command token back for essentially for flying in there. So that's great. It's a nice little speedy up discount kind of thing. Really like this guy. One of the best agents I've seen so far. The commander Zwange: unlock be neighbors with all other players. So this is yeah, you're going to want to be neighbors with other people because of what you're going to see in a moment, but also because of you can let them pass you if you want. They don't have to blow you up to get by, and you have a lot of flexibility with borders. You're very fluid in that way. So once you get to that point, again, easier in a smaller player count, you flip it over and it reads: after another player moves ships into a system that contains 1 of your command tokens, you may return that token to your reinforcements. So this is amazing. Okay, like this is probably one of the best abilities I've seen in the expansion. The reason why this is so good is that as soon as a player attacks you, you take the token out of the system and you are then free to return to that system and counter attack. That flexibility is unrivaled in the game. It's absolutely incredible. So there is a very strong reason to be neighbors with all the other players. It's dangerous, it's risky. When you see that prereq at the start, you're like, oh god, I'm not doing that. But that's the benefit of it. You can react to being attacked. Really, really cool. And then the hero, Conservator Procyon, like the other heroes, unlock after scoring 3 objectives. Flip it over, it becomes the multiverse shift. Now here we go, this is very interesting. It's an action. Place 1 frontier token in each system, that's these guys, that does not contain any planets and does not already have a frontier token. Then explore each frontier token that is in a system that contains 1 or more of your ships. Then purge this card. So it's a once per game ability, but you're going to basically cycle a lot of the deck of the frontier exploration cards. And when you're doing that, you're going to find some really cool stuff, some really powerful stuff. So this is another very exciting leader ability. Really cool. And then lastly, Watcher. A standard enough 2 cost 6 combat mech with sustained damage. With the ability, you may remove this unit from a system that contains or is adjacent to another player's units to cancel an action card played by that player. Wow, so anti-action card mech essentially. Lots of utility there. Of course, very situational, but I don't think I've ever been in a game with Twilight Imperium where someone hasn't used a couple of action cards against me, and Watcher is a nice deterrent for that. So there you have it, the Empyrean, a very strange faction, really cool theming. I love this sort of like inevitable dread that they have going on. They're really, really interesting. This whole thing about like temporary alliances and being neighbors with everybody, stacking up promissory notes from a whole table, that is really fascinating. I'm gonna be freaking out the whole time I'm not them and they're in the game, because I'll be like, oh guys, what are these guys gonna do? Really different. I love this home system, stopping people in their tracks, getting a boost when you get the ether ether stream technology going. It just makes them super flexible, and they can adapt, they can change, they can do a lot of different stuff, and I think that makes them one of the most exciting factions in the game. Really, really does. Love these guys, can't wait to give them a go. If you've played as them, let me know how you got on in the comments. I'd love to hear some stories, and thanks for watching. This is Rulebreaker. See you again very soon.